6 monitors glow in an otherwise dark apartment. It's past midnight. A trader sits perfectly still in front of them. The only sound in the room, the faint hum of a cooling fan, and the occasional tick of his own pulse in his ears. His strategy has a real edge. His analysis tonight was clean, exactly the setup he studied for years. He sees it forming. He knows what to do. And then, in the space of half a second, his hand moves toward the wrong button, the one that breaks every rule he's ever written for himself, and he clicks it anyway. Not because he didn't know better. He knew better than almost anyone in that moment. He clicked it because knowing and doing live in 2 completely different rooms of the human mind, and almost nobody ever builds a door between them. This is the question we need to sit with tonight, because it's the same question that quietly determines who survives in this business and who doesn't. Why do smart traders keep making stupid decisions? Not occasionally, over and over in patterns so predictable an outside observer could almost set a clock by them. Tonight we begin the first chapter of something larger, an exploration into the space between knowledge and execution, the space where almost every trading career is actually won or lost. Let's start by dismantling a belief nearly every beginner carries into this business without ever questioning it. The belief that trading is primarily intellectual, that if you study hard enough, learn enough patterns, practice enough setups, you'll eventually arrive at a level of understanding that removes the difficulty entirely. This feels reasonable because it mirrors almost every other skill most people have learned in their lives. Study medicine long enough and you become a competent doctor. In nearly every other domain, knowledge correlates directly with outcomes. Trading breaks this pattern completely, and most people never see it coming until they've already lost money discovering it firsthand. You can know exactly what a valid setup looks like, understand precisely why it works, have the statistics memorized, and still watch yourself abandon it in the exact moment it matters most. This isn't a contradiction. It's the entire nature of the problem. Trading isn't a knowledge problem. It's an execution problem, and execution lives somewhere knowledge can't reach on its own. Nearly every person on Earth knows that eating less and moving more leads to weight loss. This knowledge isn't complicated or hidden. And yet obesity remains one of the most persistent public health challenges in human history, not because people lack information, but because the gap between knowing and doing is where almost all human behavior actually happens. Trading operates on this exact principle, except the consequences arrive faster and the feedback is more brutal. A trader can know, with complete clarity, that he should never risk more than 1% of his account on a single position. And in a moment of frustration after 2 losses, he can risk 10% anyway, fully aware he's breaking his own rule, unable to stop himself regardless. This is the hidden psychological battle that defines this profession, a battle that has almost nothing to do with charts and everything to do with what's happening inside the person looking at them. To understand why this battle exists, we need to understand how fear operates inside the human brain, because fear, more than any indicator, is the force quietly steering most trading decisions. Human beings evolved over hundreds of thousands of years in an environment where physical survival depended on rapid threat detection. A rustling bush might be wind, or it might be a predator, and the cost of assuming wind when it was actually a predator was catastrophic. This asymmetry shaped the brain to be exceptionally sensitive to danger, quick to react, slow to relax. This wiring served our ancestors extraordinarily well. It serves modern traders extraordinarily poorly, because markets present danger that isn't physical, that can't be outrun or fought, yet triggers the exact same alarm system as a genuine physical threat. When a position moves against a trader, his amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, responds with an intensity nearly identical to facing actual physical danger, flooding his body with cortisol and adrenaline, narrowing his thinking, pushing him toward immediate action rather than calm analysis. This is why traders feel racing hearts and shaking hands during losing trades that have nothing to do with logic. The body is responding to what it perceives as genuine danger, even though the actual threat is nothing more than a number moving on a screen. This fear response creates a predictable pattern rooted in something behavioral economists call loss aversion. Decades of research, much of it from Kahneman and Amos Tversky, has shown that human beings experience the pain of losing as roughly twice as intense as the pleasure of gaining the same amount. This isn't a minor quirk. It distorts decision-making constantly. A trader facing a small, certain loss will often take irrational risks to avoid locking it in, holding a losing position far longer than his analysis would ever justify, because accepting that loss feels unbearable compared to the mathematical reality of what it represents. This same asymmetry explains why traders exit winning trades too early, grabbing a small certain profit rather than letting a larger gain develop, because watching that profit disappear feels more urgent than the logic of letting a winner run. Kahneman and Tversky expanded this into prospect theory, revealing that people evaluate outcomes based on gains and losses relative to a reference point, not the final result, and that this distorts risk-taking in remarkably predictable ways. This explains why traders who'd never normally risk large amounts suddenly become reckless after a difficult loss, desperately trying to return to a reference point that feels psychologically necessary, even when it requires far more risk than any rational analysis would recommend. Markets make this vulnerability more dangerous because they operate in genuine, irreducible uncertainty, and the brain despises uncertainty more than almost anything else. Research has shown uncertainty itself activates stress responses, sometimes more intensely than a guaranteed negative outcome. A trader would often rather have certainty about a bad outcome than uncertainty about a potentially good one. This is precisely why beginners spend years searching for a perfect strategy, one so refined it removes uncertainty entirely. This search is doomed from the start, because no strategy eliminates uncertainty. Markets are probabilistic, meaning any individual trade exists within a distribution of outcomes that can't be predicted with certainty in advance. The trader searching for perfection is really searching for an escape from reality. And every time a supposedly perfect strategy eventually produces a loss, he concludes it was flawed and moves on, repeating the cycle without ever addressing the actual problem. This brings us to the single most important shift a trader can make, moving away from the illusion of prediction toward probability thinking. Mark Douglas spent much of his life trying to communicate one deceptively simple idea. Each trade is an independent event within a larger sample, and no single outcome tells you anything meaningful about the next one. This contradicts something wired into human cognition called recency bias, the tendency to weight recent events more heavily than statistics justify. If a trader wins several trades in a row, recency bias convinces him he's figured something out, when the outcome may have had far more to do with normal variance than skill. This overconfidence connects to overconfidence bias, a well-documented tendency to overestimate your own ability to predict outcomes, particularly in uncertain domains. It explains why traders increase position size dramatically after a winning streak, only to give back months of gains during the inevitable losing streak that variance eventually produces. The opposite pattern proves equally destructive. Several consecutive losses convinces a trader his strategy is broken, when a genuinely profitable strategy can lose 5, 6, 7 trades in a row and remain perfectly healthy over a larger sample. Confirmation bias compounds this, a tendency where the brain actively seeks information, confirming existing beliefs while filtering out anything contradictory. The strategy hasn't changed. The trader's relationship with uncertainty has changed, and that shift, not any real deterioration in edge, is what leads him to abandon a sound approach and restart the cycle. Developing genuine probability thinking requires something almost paradoxical: the willingness to be wrong frequently, while remaining completely confident in your process. This distinction between confidence in outcomes and confidence in process is one of the deepest divides between amateur and professional traders. An amateur measures competence trade by trade, riding an emotional roller coaster that mirrors short-term price movement. A professional measures competence by adherence to process, understanding that following his rules on a losing trade represents success, while abandoning them on a winning trade represents failure, regardless of outcome. This emotional feedback loop connects directly to dopamine, the neurotransmitter central to nearly every motivated behavior. Dopamine isn't released simply upon receiving a reward. It's released in anticipation of one, creating a powerful pull toward actions that might produce a positive outcome, regardless of the actual probability. This explains the rush traders feel watching a position move in their favor, and why trading can become genuinely addictive, functioning through pathways strikingly similar to gambling. The unpredictability of the reward creates exactly the kind of intermittent reinforcement that psychologists have identified as the most powerful driver of compulsive behavior. This is why simply telling a trader to control his emotions rarely works. You cannot argue someone out of a dopamine response through logic alone. What actually works is building new habit loops, deliberately constructed patterns that eventually become as automatic as the impulses they replace. A habit loop has a trigger, a routine, and a reward. For an undisciplined trader, the trigger might be a sharply moving candle, the routine an impulsive entry, the reward the temporary relief of taking action instead of tolerating discomfort. For a disciplined trader, the same trigger produces a completely different routine, consulting a checklist or deliberately pausing, with the reward becoming calm, controlled execution instead of emotional relief. The difference lies entirely in which routine has been trained to follow the trigger. And here's the encouraging part. The brain possesses neuroplasticity, the ability to physically reorganize itself through repeated experience, strengthening new pathways while weakening old ones. This means the trader who currently panics isn't permanently wired that way. Those pathways can be weakened and new ones built through the same mechanism that created the original problem: consistent repetition of a different response. This is why professional traders describe discipline not as a trait some people are born with, but as a skill built through deliberate practice, much like a musician building muscle memory. This rewiring requires one final piece: emotional regulation, the ability to notice an emotional response without immediately acting on it. This differs from suppression, which research shows tends to backfire, often intensifying the emotion someone tries to avoid. Genuine regulation involves acknowledging the feeling, understanding its origin, and consciously choosing a response aligned with long-term goals rather than immediate impulse. This skill improves specifically through practice, work that rarely gets discussed in trading education focused only on strategy. History offers clear illustrations of these principles playing out at scale. On October 19, 1987, Black Monday, the Dow fell over 20% in a single session. Many participants had grown confident in models that had performed reliably during the preceding bull market. A textbook case of recency bias at an institutional scale, where recent stability was mistaken for permanent stability. As the decline began, portfolio insurance strategies designed to limit losses actually accelerated selling, creating a feedback loop where fear generated more selling, which generated more fear. The dot-com bubble of the late 90s offers a lesson in overconfidence bias at a cultural level. As internet stocks climbed to valuations disconnected from fundamentals, a belief spread that traditional valuation no longer applied, that a new paradigm had arrived. When the bubble collapsed, trillions in value evaporated, not because the technology was worthless, but because collective psychology had detached prices from any sustainable relationship with value. The 2008 financial crisis showed how prospect theory can drive escalating risk at an institutional scale. Major firms had built enormous leverage on the assumption housing prices couldn't decline nationally. As losses mounted, rather than accepting them, many institutions increased risk further, attempting to trade back to their previous reference point rather than accept a painful new reality. Exactly the pattern prospect theory predicts. More recently, March of 2020 offered a compressed demonstration of the same patterns during the COVID crash. Some traders abandoned every principle they claimed to believe in, selling at the exact bottom, driven by pure fear. Others, having genuinely built these habits long before, followed their predetermined rules, accepted losses as part of an uncertain process, and positioned themselves for the recovery that followed. The market hadn't determined which group succeeded. The psychological preparation each trader had done long before determined it entirely. This brings us back to the question that opened this chapter. Why do smart traders keep making stupid decisions? Intelligence measured by analytical capability and pattern recognition operates in an entirely different domain than the emotional regulation required for consistent execution under genuine uncertainty. A trader can possess extraordinary analytical intelligence while possessing underdeveloped emotional regulation. And in trading, this combination proves genuinely dangerous, because sophisticated analysis creates false confidence. Confidence that gets undermined the moment real psychological pressure arrives. The market doesn't care how intelligent your analysis was. It only responds to the decisions you actually execute, and those decisions flow through whatever psychological architecture you've built, consciously or not, over years of repeated experience. Trading success was never primarily an intellectual achievement. It's a psychological and behavioral one, built through the same mechanisms that shape any deeply ingrained human pattern: repetition, emotional regulation, and the deliberate rewiring of responses that once served us well in a different environment, but now require conscious redirection here. The traders who eventually develop genuine consistency aren't the ones who accumulated the most knowledge. They're the ones who did the harder, less visible work of rewiring their relationship with uncertainty itself. This journey doesn't happen quickly, and it doesn't happen through reading alone. Though understanding these mechanisms is a necessary first step, most traders never take seriously enough. It happens through deliberate practice, through genuinely experiencing the discomfort of following a rule when every impulse screams to abandon it, and gradually discovering that discomfort begins to diminish, replaced by something that feels less like effort and more like identity. Somewhere out there tonight, a trader with genuine analytical skill is about to make a decision his own knowledge would tell him is wrong. Driven by psychological forces he's never taken time to understand. And somewhere else, another trader with far less sophisticated analysis, but far more developed emotional regulation, will make a simpler decision, execute it precisely as planned, and walk away from his screen with his capital, his discipline, and his confidence in his process fully intact. The market will never ask either of them how much they knew. It will only ever ask what they actually did in the specific moment their psychology was tested most severely. And that answer, more than any strategy either of them ever learned, will determine which one of them is still trading 5 years from now. This is where our exploration truly begins. Not with strategy, not with analysis, but with the quiet, largely invisible architecture of the mind that determines whether any strategy ever gets a genuine chance to prove itself at all.